I never received it, that's all I said. One sentence. 7 words. Spoken just loud enough to cut through the clinking champagne flutes and the overly loud Mariah Carey remix blasting from the rooftop speakers. Our CEO, Gregory Whitmore, a man who uses too much hair gel and too few ethics, had just raised his glass to me. Or more precisely, to Alina, which is my middle name and what he calls me when he's pretending to know his employees. To Alina. He beamed, looking out at the crowd like a pageant host. She hit every milestone this quarter and earned herself that fat $20,000 bonus. Cheers, applause followed, laughter. I even heard someone from sales yell, "Buy us all drinks, Alina." I didn't laugh, I didn't raise my glass. I just looked up at Greg from across the terrace, met his gaze, and said those 7 words. I never received it, and that's when the party died. It didn't collapse exactly. It bled out slowly, in silence. The CFO, Daryl, who always smells like old money and Pepto-Bismol, twitched hard enough to almost spill his drink. The HR director, Simone, started coughing into her napkin like she'd suddenly forgotten how to swallow shrimp cocktail. Even the intern manning the dessert table stopped slicing cheesecake and stared. Greg, to his credit, didn't flinch. He just chuckled, that fake, airy laugh he uses when investors ask about overdue reports. Always modest. Well, it's in the system, Alina. Payroll must have processed it already. I blinked once. I checked this morning, nothing deposited. Simone made a noise halfway between a laugh and a sneeze. I'll have finance look into it first thing Monday, Greg said, his voice a little too bright now. Let's not talk shop tonight. You deserve to celebrate. I'm sure I do, I said. Just want to know what I'm celebrating. And with that, I set my glass down, still full, and walked off the rooftop. Left Greg standing there like a balloon with the air leaking out. He kept smiling, but you could see the edges starting to crack. Listen, if you've made it this far into the story, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button and give this a like. 95% of you listen in silence, and I get it, you're multitasking, pretending to work. But hey, keeps this whole twisted circus rolling, and my team would really appreciate it. Anyway, I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't scream into my steering wheel or fire off an angry email. I just drove home, made myself a grilled cheese, and opened my laptop. Then I started pulling the files. Because here's the thing, I wasn't confused. I wasn't even shocked. I was prepared. 3 months ago, I asked for a copy of my original employment contract. For tax purposes, I said. Legal sent it over without a second thought. I saved it in a folder titled "In Case They Get Stupid." That folder had 27 other documents in it. Vendor invoices I'd flagged. Internal memos I wasn't supposed to see. A PDF from 2 years ago titled "Bonus Allocations Executive Discretion." A spreadsheet showing budget reallocations that just happened to divert $20,000 from my department to miscellaneous development, approved by Greg himself. And a personal favorite, a screenshot of a Slack message where Daryl asked if it was okay to ghost pay her Q4 bonus to cover Aspen travel. Ghost pay. Aspen. I could have laughed if I weren't so utterly done. See, I didn't get where I am by being loud. I'm not the one who bangs on tables or leads motivational chants. I'm the one who fixes things, quietly, efficiently, without drama. And when people like Greg forget that quiet doesn't mean powerless, well, that's when things start to break. I sent one email before I went to bed, just one, no attachments, no explanations, just the subject line, Clause 7.4 Notice of Invocation. And to be clear, I wrote that clause myself 3 years ago, slipped it into my contract after watching too many old boys get handshakes and handouts for projects I delivered. HR never read it. Legal skimmed. Greg signed it during a budget crisis while scarfing pad thai on a Zoom call. Clause 7.4. Failure to disperse performance bonus within 7 calendar days of confirmed milestone completion entitles the employee to initiate proprietary protection protocols without further notice. I'd all forgotten about it, I hadn't, and now I'd just flipped the first domino. Monday morning smelled like panic and burnt coffee. Not that anyone would admit it, on the surface the office was its usual beige purgatory. People walked briskly, phones rang with exaggerated urgency, and somewhere down the hall, someone kept pretending to laugh at something on Slack. But beneath the fluorescent hum, something had shifted. I could feel it. By 9:12 a.m., Simone from HR had already stopped by my desk twice under the guise of just checking in. Her blouse still had glitter on it from the rooftop party. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Hey, Olivia," she said, too cheerful. "So weird about the bonus thing. Probably just payroll being slow, right?" I didn't even bother looking up. "Sure," I said, "probably." At 10:03 a.m., I got the email I'd been waiting for. Subject line, "Contract review follow-up urgent from Meredith Jane, lead counsel." She asked me to join a legal review meeting at 10:30 sharp. Small conference room, just her and me. No need to bring anything, the email said, so I brought everything. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and fear. Meredith was already seated when I arrived, fingers pressed together like she was trying to physically hold her thoughts in place. She didn't offer me coffee. She didn't smile. She gestured to the chair across from her like I was there to discuss a will. She held a printed copy of my contract in her lap. Pages slightly creased. One pink post-it marking page 7. I sat, set my leather folder on the table, waited. Meredith cleared her throat. Olivia, have you ever exercised clause 7.4 before? No, I said, but the clause is valid. Signed, countersigned, timestamped. I'll find the backup in the contract repository. Document hash Olivia 746B. She blinked. I continued. It was added as a condition of continued employment during the 2020 Q3 restructuring. I wrote it myself, ran it past outside counsel, and sent it to legal for incorporation. Greg approved it over lunch on October 12, said it sounded cool and assertive. Meredith looked down again, flipping to the marked page. She read the clause aloud, slowly, like each word was a warning she'd ignored. Clause 7.4. Failure to disperse performance bonus within 7 calendar days of confirmed milestone completion entitles the employee to initiate proprietary protection protocols without further notice. Her voice thinned as she got to the end. She looked up at me, pale. You're saying you invoked this yesterday? I am. And those protocols, she hesitated. They're not just symbolic. Are they? They're layered, I said calmly. Encryption, access restrictions, decoupling of process integrations, auto-expiry triggers. Nothing irreversible, yet. Her pen slipped slightly from her fingers. And the documentation? I nodded toward my folder, protected under individual authorship until the bonus is legally fulfilled. Page 10 of the clause addendum. You'll find it notarized. She stared at me for a long moment, no longer trying to hide the tremble in her jaw. Greg said he mentioned the bonus at the party to be gracious. He assumed it had been paid. It hadn't. Have you spoken to finance? I spoke to my bank. I spoke to payroll. I reviewed every deposit since October. I even pulled the ACH batch logs for the period. My bonus isn't there. She stood and walked over to the conference phone. Dialed an internal line. Get Greg in here. Now. We sat in silence for 3 minutes. I could hear the clock tick, the HVAC hum. Meredith's breathing pick up speed like a runner about to collapse at the finish line. Greg burst in like he was crashing a game show. What's the emergency? He said, out of breath and still carrying a protein shake. Meredith stood and handed him the contract. No pleasantries, no preamble, just you signed this, you activated this. He flipped pages with that same performative gusto he uses at shareholder meetings. Then he stopped, read the clause, blinked. Wait, this is real? Very, I said. I thought it was like a flex, a negotiation line. It's a clause, I said, and it's been triggered. Greg looked up, jaw clenched. So what, you're locking down our systems over a bonus? Meredith cut in before I could. No. She's legally authorized to initiate protective actions on proprietary frameworks she authored. That includes quite a lot, Greg, including operations protocols. His face drained. You're telling me, he said slowly, you could lose access to the systems she built? No, I replied, you've already lost them. Access was time limited. The protocols kicked in at midnight. Greg looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Meredith just stared down at the table like it might offer her a way out. I'll fix it, Greg muttered. I'll call payroll. We'll push it through. That would constitute retroactive coercion, I said evenly. Clause 7.4 defines any bonus payment post-invocation as bribery to reverse a protective protocol. That language is very specific. He turned to Meredith. This can't hold up. She didn't answer, because she knew it would. Greg spent the rest of that meeting doing what overconfident men do best, bluffing with the desperation of someone realizing the chips weren't in his stack. First came denial, dressed up as concern. Then came delay, wrapped in false charm and administrative jargon. I've seen it before, hell, I'd lived it for the better part of a decade at that company. But this time I wasn't the quiet fixer behind the curtain. I was the one holding the rope, and Greg had just stepped into the noose. It's gotta be a payroll glitch, he said, pacing now as if motion might summon credibility. I'll get Daryl on it, he's probably already flagged it. Would you like me to forward the screenshots? I asked. Calm. No bite, just offering facts like a waitress offering coffee refills. Greg blinked. Screenshots? I opened my folder and slid a single printed sheet across the table. Transaction history from my bank, highlighted and annotated. Underneath it, stapled neatly, was an internal log from our own accounting software. Payment batch IDs, disbursement dates, amounts, and approval chains. Checked and verified, I said. All bonuses for Q4 performance were issued as of the 15th per schedule. Mine wasn't. Meredith leaned in to examine the paperwork, her mouth a tight line. Greg didn't look, he just turned to the door like maybe there was an escape route hiding behind the coat rack. I mean, this doesn't make sense, he muttered. You're telling me the system skipped you? No, I said, I'm telling you someone did. Silence. Meredith finally spoke. I'll need to verify these against finance records. Olivia, we appreciate your cooperation in the meantime. I nodded once, of course. To keep everything above board, I've submitted a written invocation of Clause 7.4 to HR, time-stamped, delivered via internal and external channels. COP is attached to that same folder. Greg's eyes widened just slightly at that. He knew what that meant. A verbal warning is one thing. A formal invocation. That's a legal warhead in a tailored suit. I think we're escalating too quickly here, Simone from HR said later that afternoon when she called me into her office. She had the soft, frantic tone of someone trying to tape over a pipe leak with scotch tape. There's probably just a mistake somewhere. Maybe the approval got stuck. You know how Daryl's team is. I gave her a thin smile. Sure, but for bonus that size, and considering how it was announced publicly, I figured I'd be proactive. Well, she said, fidgeting with a branded stress ball, we'll look into it. Just give us some time, okay? I've documented everything, I said, and I'd rather not delay corrective action. I assume the company feels the same. She didn't answer. Just nodded and gestured vaguely at her screen like she had some form to fill out, as if pretending to work on it would buy time. But here's the part they didn't understand. My comm wasn't compliance. It was calculation. Because while legal stalled, HR bluffed, and Greg paced around like a ferret in a windstorm, I was already 10 steps ahead. My logs were more than financial. I'd built a full internal tracker for every milestone, bonus approval, and resource allocation since I joined. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I did. Trust them to forget. Trust them to cover for each other. Trust them to reroute funds when they thought no one was watching. Buried in those logs under a seemingly boring column labeled authorization trail was something I knew they hadn't counted on. A pattern. 3 identical authorizations. 3 redirected payments. Same coded memo tag, BINF, project realignment. One of them was mine. The other 2, executives who hadn't even met their deliverables, ghost bonuses. I didn't mention it yet. Timing was everything. Let the rot rise to the surface on its own, like it always does. That afternoon, I went back to my desk and pulled up the encrypted vault where I kept my audit files. I flagged 3 of them. Added a red marker to the one labeled Q4 variance, flagged entries $10K. Then I reopened my private project logs and made a single entry, delay tactic confirmed. Legal not unified. HR stalling. Audit escalation, 48-hour countdown. And then I did something Greg would never have expected. I made myself a cup of tea, logged out of my email, and went home exactly at 5:01 p.m. because I didn't need to chase anyone. I'd already set the fuse. All they had to do was keep lying long enough for it to burn down everything around them. By Tuesday morning, the office smelled like secrets. Not just the usual stench of overbrewed coffee and reheated salmon from accounting's communal fridge, but something sourer, sharper, like nerves left out in the sun too long. No one knew what was happening exactly, but everyone knew something was. Greg stopped strutting. Meredith stopped smiling. Daryl from finance suddenly found religion and started avoiding elevators with other humans in them. Even Simone from HR, who usually chirped out Happy Tuesday, like it was a holy greeting, was glued to her inbox, one AirPod in, nodding furiously at whatever crisis call she was pretending to be in control of. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. While they were scrambling to reconcile discrepancies, I was already deep into what I now considered Phase 2, the quiet audit. For the past 3 years, I'd kept a second system. Not company-sanctioned, not cloud-backed. An encrypted, air-gapped external drive I jokingly referred to as my insurance policy. Not because I was paranoid, because I was experienced. I'd watched too many colleagues get blamed for budget oversights that weren't theirs. Watched high-level execs gaslight staff into silence over clerical errors that somehow always favored people with parking spots. My system didn't just track bonuses. It tracked movements, financial, procedural, personnel-based. Every time a vendor payment was processed, I copied the metadata. Every time a bonus was authorized, I screen captured every hire, every departure, every email with a curious BCC, I logged it. The file structures were dry, sure, labeled by quarter and initiative, but once you opened them, it was like staring into the plumbing of a very corrupt building. And now, combing through Q4 logs, I saw exactly what I feared. 3 C-level bonuses, all authorized on the same date, all tagged under reallocated discretionary funds, all sourced from departments that had reported unclaimed performance incentives. The numbers matched the missing disbursements, mine included. One of them, I remembered, had been publicly denied due to underperformance. Another exec hadn't even submitted his final milestone report, yet there was his $25,000 payout, neatly approved, signed off by Greg. Memo line, strategic retention. Strategic theft was more like it, and one more thing. Name I didn't recognize. A payout tagged retention bonus to a consultant named D. Wellingham, no employee ID, no tax documentation, no performance log. Just a wire transfer to an out-of-state account and a note buried in the finance system under contractor services confidential. I checked our contractor directory. No Wellingham. I checked payroll. Nothing. Then I checked our new hire and separation logs. That's when my stomach clenched. He had a template for onboarding ghost employees, one used when building dummy access credentials for product testing. Normally, these were temporary, sandboxed, and monitored, but someone had copy-pasted that template and used it to create an entire personnel record, enough to justify contractor disbursement. The signature on the authorization? Daryl. Now, I'm not a whistleblower by nature. I don't enjoy takedowns, but I do believe in balance. And watching these men loot our company like a piñata at a frat reunion while gaslighting me over a $20,000 bonus, that was my line. I didn't need to go to the press. I didn't need a scandal on LinkedIn. I just needed to pull one very specific thread. At 3:44 p.m., I used my personal laptop in a public cafe, behind a VPN, with a freshly created encrypted Proton Mail account. I crafted a short, motionless message to the board's internal audit committee. Subject: possible unauthorized executive disbursements body, 3Q4 bonuses approved outside of performance parameters. One link to a ghost employee profile, all traceable via internal audit trail. Keywords: Wellingham, reallocated discretionary, project realignment. No name, no threat, no demand, just enough breadcrumbs to force someone's hand. By the time I got back to the office, I could feel it like weather rolling in behind drywall. The cloud hadn't burst yet, but the pressure was changing. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Emails slowed. Slack channels went eerily quiet. Greg passed me in the hallway and gave me a smile so forced it looked like it had been stapled to his face. "Everything all right, Olivia?" "Everything's in motion," I said. That night, I backed up my audit logs again. Triple copies. Stored one in a safety deposit box under my sister's name. Mailed another to my attorney with a timestamp letter marked "Do not open unless instructed." Kept the third in my desk drawer, unmarked, unlabeled, innocuous-looking as a user manual, because things were about to get loud. And when they did, I wanted to be the only one holding earplugs. By Thursday, Meredith was a ghost in her own office. Not literally, she was still there, still wearing her power blazers and her unreadable lawyer face, but the fire behind her eyes had flickered into something cold and careful. I saw it when she passed me in the hallway, the way she hesitated before speaking, the way her fingers twitched near her phone like it might bite her. She wasn't avoiding me. She was circling the perimeter of a situation she finally realized she didn't control, so I gave her a door. "Hey Meredith," I said, leaning into her office around 11:15 a.m. "Got 5 minutes today? Just you and me?" She blinked up from her laptop, of course. No fake smiles this time, no corporate small talk. She cleared the table instinctively, like she knew something important was coming. I stepped in, shut the door behind me, and placed a single folder on the polished wood between us. Black, sealed with a sticker that read, "Privileged internal counsel only. This stays between us until Monday," I said. "But I think you'll want to read it before then." She stared at the folder like it might hiss. "What's inside?" "A timeline," I said, "cross-referenced documentation. Screenshots, process logs, bonus disbursement approvals. All of it compared line by line against actual payments. Highlighted inconsistencies. Authorizations with no signatures. Memos that don't match deposits. And you compiled this how?" "I built most of the systems," I said, "remember? The ops infrastructure, the milestone approval engine, the internal requisition logs. I know where everything lives, and more importantly, I know when something doesn't match." Her lips pressed into a line. "And what exactly are you implying?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm stating." She opened the folder. The first page was a high-level timeline, Q3 to Q4. At each milestone, I'd marked when I submitted deliverables, when bonuses were contractually due, when executive payouts occurred, and when discrepancies first appeared. Then came the screenshots, dated, time-stamped, internal system logs showing approval signatures by Greg and Daryl. Next to them, bank transfer receipts showing amounts moved into unrelated accounts. Meredith's eyes moved quickly. Her lips moved, too, silent reading. Every now and then, her fingers would hesitate at the edge of a page, like she wasn't sure she wanted to see what came next. And she hit the red tab. She paused, looked up at me. "SEC implications? If filed," I said. "There are at least 2 instances of unreported executive compensation rerouted through non-payroll disbursements. That's a compliance problem, especially if those funds came from designated employee bonus pools," which I pointed to a highlighted section. "This ledger shows they did." She leaned back in her chair, hands folded but not tightly. Her poker face was cracking. "Just a little. What are you asking me, Olivia?" "I'm giving you the chance to decide what kind of lawyer you want to be when this goes public," I said. "One who tried to clean the blood before the guests noticed, or one who helped them mop up a murder?" "You're threatening to go public?" "No," I said. "I'm giving you a head start." She looked back at the folder. The weight of it sat between us like a loaded weapon. It wasn't thick, only about 20 pages, but it was dense with consequences. And it wasn't just Greg and Daryl this time. There were emails from Simone signing off on payout deferrals, marked discretionary hold do not flag. There was a memo from the VP of Sales noting his surprise at receiving a bonus he hadn't qualified for. There were Slack threads from junior staff questioning a new hire who didn't exist and getting told to drop it. "What happens if I give this to the board?" she asked. "Protect the company," I said. "You lose Greg, maybe Daryl, but you don't lose everything, and if I don't?" "I've already mailed a copy to a contact in the oversight committee. They don't know what they're holding yet. I told them to wait for a signal. You can choose to make that signal a controlled call or a siren." She exhaled through her nose, closed the folder, kept it beside her instead of handing it back. "And Greg?" she asked. "Don't worry," I said, standing. "I won't be talking to him. And pretty soon, I suspect, neither will you." That afternoon, Greg called Meredith 5 times. She didn't answer once. By Friday morning, Greg's kingdom smelled like a funeral no one wanted to attend. Quiet, overpolished, and filled with people pretending they weren't waiting for the coffin to drop. The smiles were thinner, the coffee stronger. And every time someone said all hands meeting, 3 people winced. The whispers started in the elevator. Did you hear about the ghost contractor thing? They're saying someone found payout files that don't match the book's legal's been in meetings all week. I heard the boards asking questions. And Greg? Greg had gone from peacocking to pacing. He was suddenly too busy for team check-ins, ducking out of lunch meetings, ducking into legal's hallway like a raccoon sniffing for exits. His eyes were red-rimmed from stress or bourbon, maybe both. I passed him once in the hallway and he gave me a smile so crooked I thought it might slide off his face. I didn't smile back, because now silence was leverage, and I had a lot of it. Simone from HR sent me a formal email with the subject line, "Apologies regarding bonus miscommunication." It was corporate speak at its most desperate, acknowledging a clerical oversight, affirming that performance was recognized, and offering to immediately rectify the issue with a retroactive wire transfer of $20,000. I forwarded it to legal. Then I replied politely. Per Clause 7.4, any post-invocation attempt to issue funds without full admission of contractual breach and compensation per terms may be considered retroactive bribery. I must decline. No bluff, no fire. Just surgical language backed by an arsenal of documentation. Within 2 hours, I received a revised clarification from HR. I didn't bother opening it. Meredith already had a copy. And while Greg scrambled to jam the cork back in the bottle, the board began circling like sharks who'd just caught a whiff of blood in a heated pool. It started with a calendar ping. One of the external board members, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, requested a confidential 15-minute catch-up. No subject line, no agenda, just a Google Meet link and a window titled Personal. The name made me pause, Richard Kessler. He used to be my mentor. Back before the IPO, before the exec reshuffle, before Greg inherited the corner office like a cursed family heirloom. Richard was sharp, ethical, and famously unemotional, except when it came to operational integrity. He once shut down a product line because someone faked 2 compliance checkboxes. I joined the call from home. Neutral background, good lighting, folder open just in case. Richard appeared on screen, leaned forward like he was already halfway through the conversation. "You look calm," he said. "I am," I replied. "You've always been a chess player. And you never moved a piece unless you'd already seen the board twice." I said nothing. He nodded. "So, tell me, do you want to talk before this becomes public?" That told me everything I needed to know. The board knew. The panic had trickled up. Or more likely, Meredith had handed off that folder quietly, carefully, like a live grenade with the pin halfway out. Either way, someone had flipped the internal alarm. "I've said all I need to," I said. "The documentation is thorough. We've reviewed it," he said. "But I want to understand your terms. What happens if this goes wide?" I file a provisional complaint with the SEC. I issue a licensing restriction notice for proprietary processes under clause protection, and I formally remove myself from all active operational systems unless breach restitution is paid in full. He nodded again, slow. "Greg has no idea, does he?" "I think he suspects," I said, "but denial's his favorite mirror." "Are you looking to replace him?" "No," I said, voice flat. "I'm looking to remove him." Richard leaned back. His expression didn't change, but the silence felt different now, like a door quietly swinging open behind him. "We'll be contacted by the audit committee directly," he said. "If you have any additional materials, they're in the folder already," I said. I thought they might be. He ended the call without fanfare. "No thank you, no false optimism. Just a curt nod and a screen gone black." That night, Greg tried to corner me in the parking garage. He caught me just as I reached my car. "Hey," he said, too loud in the echoing concrete. "Look, this whole thing, it's gone sideways. I didn't mean for it to." I opened my door, tossed my bag in. He stepped closer. "Let's just settle this. Quietly. No more legal back and forth. You'll get your bonus. Hell, I'll throw in a signing retainer if you just..." I looked at him. Really looked at him. "The moment passed," I said. He tried to speak again, but I started the engine and shut the door. Left him standing there, his words bouncing off the walls, unheard. Because he didn't understand. He wasn't negotiating anymore. He was waiting for judgment. Friday night dragged its feet like a guilty child. The building emptied faster than usual. There were no after-hours drinks, no slack jokes about finally surviving the week. No one microwaving leftovers like they planned to work late but really just needed to kill time before the bars opened. Instead, desks sat abandoned, lights flickered off in clusters, and I could hear the tension humming in the vents. By 6:17 p.m., Meredith was still in her office, door closed, lights on. Greg had called her 4 times. I knew because the receptionist left early and I saw his name flashing on her desk phone unanswered. By 7:40, the legal Slack channel pinged once, then silence. I didn't go home, not yet. I stayed in my glass-walled cubicle, methodically reviewing process manuals that would never need revisions again. Not because I was paranoid, because I was patient. The clause had triggered at midnight 5 days earlier. That gave them until midnight tonight to correct the breach before secondary protocols auto-executed. They thought it was a bluff. It wasn't. At 8:03 p.m., HR issued a formal override request to payroll, a backdated bonus wire transfer for employee Olivia M. Reyes, marked urgent. Memo line, Performance Compensation Correction Q4. Legal blocked it in under 8 minutes. Meredith herself issued the response. Clause 7.4 cannot be nullified post-invocation without consent and restitution as defined. Approval denied. Attempting to reverse protocol without resolution constitutes further breach. I smiled, just a little, because now Greg wasn't just scrambling, he was bleeding leverage with every tick of the clock. By 9:15, someone inside finance cracked. I didn't see it happen, but I saw the evidence land in Meredith's inbox through the reflection on my screen. A forward, subject line, flagged transfer trail confidential. The attached email thread was short, brutal. It showed Greg instructing Daryl directly to reallocate discretionary bonus reserve, move raise to training budget. We can comp her later if needed. Keep it fluid for Aspen. Aspen. The team training retreat I wasn't invited to. One with the $22,000 hotel invoice, spa receipts labeled client engagement, and 4 dinners for 2 charged under mentorship sessions. And there it was, the line that mattered. Her bonus covers the last villa. I'll handle spin if she asks. Timestamp 2 days after I hit my final Q4 milestone. 2 days after I earned what they stole. The thread included Daryl's reply. A simple thumbs-up emoji. No signatures, no shame. At 10:22 p.m., Meredith sent it to the board. No commentary, no legalese. Just the thread, a subject line marked urgent breach confirmation, and the header as requested. I don't know who inside legal leaked it to me, but someone did, slid it across the metaphorical table with no return address. I read it twice, printed it once, folded it neatly into the original folder under a new tab labeled Malice. At 11:09 p.m., Greg finally cracked. I was packing up when he came pounding down the hallway like a bad storm, tie loose, eyes wild, holding his phone like it had betrayed him personally. You, he barked, voice hoarse, you could have come to me first. We could have worked this out. I did, I said, zipping my bag, you just didn't listen. You're really going to burn all this down over a bonus? No, I said. You did that when you stole it. His jaw flexed like he wanted to shout, but all he managed was a laugh, bitter and cracked. You really think the board's gonna side with you? I looked at him calmly. I don't need them to side with me, I just need them to follow the money. He opened his mouth, closed it, and turned away. Maybe to scream, maybe to cry, maybe just to figure out where it all went wrong. At 11:58 p.m., I dropped the final file into the shared board drive. Title: Proprietary Protocols. Temporary Access Restriction Notice. At midnight, the lockout executed automatically. Every operational manual I'd authored, every automated process, every embedded protocol, every efficiency model they used to keep the company breathing, now required a licensing key to access. They didn't have it, and until restitution was made, they wouldn't. The moment of no return had passed, and Greg, he was finally out of time. The boardroom at 9 a.m. sharp was a mausoleum dressed in mahogany. 12 chairs filled, 2 empty, 1 reserved for the ghost of Greg's credibility. I sat at the far end, not at the table but close enough to see the whites of their eyes. I didn't dress for war, I dressed for court. Black blazer, no jewelry, documents in one hand, the calm weight of months of silence in the other. Next to me sat Jonathan Lynn, external compliance auditor. Quiet as a whisper, sharp as a scalpel. He didn't speak unless summoned, didn't blink unless necessary. He was here to observe and if needed, verify. Meredith stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 of her senior associates and the kind of leather-bound binder that only shows up when things have gone nuclear. Greg wasn't here. Daryl, the CFO, looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. The skin beneath his eyes hung loose, and his tie was the color of defeat. Simone from HR had the gall to look surprised, still blinking like she might wake up and find it was all just a stress dream. Meredith opened the meeting with no preamble. Clause 7.4, she said, crisp and cold, was drafted into Miss Ray's employment contract in 2020, authorized by then-CEO Whitmore, and legally binding per corporate policy at the time. The language is explicit. She flipped open the binder and read it aloud. For the record, failure to disburse performance bonus within 7 calendar days of confirmed milestone completion entitles the employee to initiate proprietary protection protocols without further notice. Then she looked up. The breach is confirmed. The protocols have executed. And per verification by Mr. Lin, she gestured toward Jonathan, who nodded once. Those protocols are lawful, trackable, and technically sound. What does that mean in practice? Asked one board member, adjusting his glasses like maybe they'd help him see the answer he wanted. Jonathan spoke, voice low but definitive. It means your operations backbone is watermarked. Every process authored by Miss Ray's, scheduling systems, vendor automations, cross-department syncs is traceable, and currently locked under her licensing control. A rustle moved through the room like a cold wind. One of the board members leaned forward. Watermarked, as in, digitally? Yes, I said calmly. I've embedded unique syntax markers in the logic string of every proprietary model I built. If duplicated or migrated, they trip a compliance flag and invalidate the integrity of the process. It's in the logs, documented, time-stamped. Another board member, one I'd never met, let out a slow breath. And no one noticed, no one looked, I said. And as long as I was paid, it didn't matter. A longer silence followed. the kind that hangs, waits, measures. Then Meredith closed the binder. In light of the confirmed breach and the risk to company continuity, legal formally recommends the immediate severance of CEO Gregory Whitmore and the resignation of CFO Daryl Ingram. Their direct involvement in the reallocation of Miss Reyes's bonus has been substantiated via internal records. Daryl didn't even try to object. He stood, trembling slightly, muttered something about forwarding credentials before noon. No one stopped him. Simone opened her mouth, then closed it again. She knew she was next. Maybe not now, but soon. What's our exposure? A board member asked. Meredith turned to me. I met her gaze, then turned to the table. Minimal if you move now. I haven't filed the SEC complaint. I haven't activated external claim procedures. But the longer you delay formal resolution, more complicated this gets. And what would formal resolution entail? Another asked. I'll present my terms in writing, I said. They'll include restitution, damages, licensing fees, and reassignment of specific internal rights. Are you planning to stay with the company? I looked at them and let that question hang in the air like smoke. It wasn't time to answer that. Not yet. Clause 7.4 is clear, I said instead. I've followed every word of it to the letter. What happens next is your decision. They didn't nod. They didn't speak. They just stared at me, at the ghost of Greg, at the yawning hole where their operational certainty used to live. And then Richard Kessler, the only one at the table who'd ever seen me in the trenches, spoke for the first time. Let's take a short recess, he said. I believe Miss Reyes will be presenting terms, and I suggest we listen very, very carefully. The recess lasted 11 minutes, just long enough for board members to confer in hushed pairs, for Meredith to field 2 whispered calls behind the soundproof glass, and for Simone to quietly vanish from the room. No one acknowledged her absence. No one needed to. When they returned, the atmosphere was different. Less tension, more resignation. Like gamblers realizing the dealer wasn't bluffing, she was holding the only cards that mattered. Richard Kessler cleared his throat. Miss Reyes, you have the floor. I stood without theatrics. Walked to the head of the table, folder in hand, posture still, voice steady. This is not a negotiation, I began. This is a reckoning. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pace. I spoke like someone who'd been ignored for too long and finally had the room's full attention and wasn't the least bit impressed by it. You owe me $20,000. That's the easy part. That's math. No one moved. You also owe me compensation for breach of contract. Penalties incurred per clause 7.4, outlined in the subarticle I wrote, which you never amended. You owe me for the loss of access, the attempt at retroactive coercion, and the reputational damage I incurred by being paraded as someone who'd been rewarded, when in fact I'd been robbed. A few flinched. None interrupted. And more than that, I continued, opening the folder and laying the first document flat on the table. You owe me licensing fees. I tapped the watermark diagram, a flowchart with digital hashes embedded in each core operational model. I own these processes. Legally. Until the breach is resolved, you do not have the right to continue using them without license. Any replication, workaround, or attempt to reverse engineer will trigger an automated legal alert and enforcement via provisional IP claim. I laid down the second document, which, for the record, I filed last night. Gasps, a quiet curse from someone at the far end. Meredith simply closed her eyes for a beat she'd known. The rest were just catching up. I've given you 6 days, I said. That's 6 more than you gave me. And now we're at the point of no return. Woman from the audit committee leaned forward. What are your conditions? I handed her the typed list. Restitution, full bonus. Clause 7.4 penalties tripled per contractual timeline. Licensing fees retroactive to the date of breach. Public correction of internal records. Termination of Greg Whitmore and disqualification of Daryl Ingram from future executive reinstatement. HR review under external counsel. And, Richard asked. I met his eyes. I'm not staying. That rippled through them harder than anything else. Shock, disbelief, a faint note of regret. I don't want a promotion, I said. I don't want a corner office or a fake apology or a plaque next quarter. I built this company's backbone while Greg played golf and Daryl played God. You let it happen, and now you're reaping it. I gathered my folder, clicked the latch shut. You'll get what I owe you, documentation, keys, all operational protocols, once terms are met and confirmed by counsel. Until then, your systems remain frozen under protection. A silence stretched so long it bordered on surreal. Then Richard finally said, you could destroy us with this. No, I said, you already did. I'm just not letting you profit from the rubble. And then, just before I turned to leave, I gave them the last piece. Oh, and one more thing, I leaned in slightly. You've been positioning for an IPO, I know. I've seen the roadshow deck. If my licensing isn't resolved before the S1 is filed, your prospectus will be flagged for IP dispute and material operational risk. A beat. I walk and your IPO walks with me. No one stopped me as I left. They couldn't, because I didn't burn the bridge. I turned it into a drawbridge, and I'm the only one holding the lever. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.